All right. I am seeing you, so I'm going to assume everybody is seeing your screen. Um, Julie, I want to thank you again publicly. Julie Jacobson will be speaking today, and she is the director of SPAY Tennessee, as well as the director of our Community Cats Grants program. Little did Julie know when I said, would you help me out on something, that she would end up running the whole thing, basically. Um, but she is just a natural at this job, and she's done a great job at continuing to expand the program and doing the things that she's done. But in addition to wearing the Community Cats Grants hat, she also runs SPAY Tennessee and has a very strong regional program down in Tennessee, and is a strong advocate in networking around the country and getting access to spay neuter, affordable spay neuter all around the state. So that's a little bit about who Julie is. Julie, you can expand on your bio. She also was a guest on the Community Cats podcast, so you can always go to our website, search Julie's name, and you can listen to the podcast that I had her. And she also has some awesome spay neuter sunglasses. So at this point in time, I'm going to hand everything over to Julie. You can feel free to write in your questions during the presentation in the questions box. I will be grouping those questions together and saving them up, and we will ask them at the end of the presentation. All right, Julie, it's all yours.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, this is kind of fun to do, and one reason for this webinar too is we really would like to see more good applications and just see more spay neuter of community cats. I'll do just about anything if it means more spay neuter in general. So yeah, so thanks for attending, thanks for applying, and I do recognize some of the names from people who have successfully completed our program. So that's also fun. Oh, let's see, now it's asking me if I want to leave. I don't want to leave. It's not letting me change slides. There it is. It's just slow. Okay. Some of the preliminary stuff, what we're really looking for, yes, you really do in fact have to be a 501c3 organization, and we really are looking for groups that have been in operation for at least a year. You've probably seen it, a lot of groups just tend to fold. They start out gangbusters and fold pretty quickly. And we're also looking for the smaller groups. Um, in general, under $100,000 of annual income. By exception, we can consider some other groups, but that is one thing about being in rural Tennessee. Our annual income is consistently under 50,000, sometimes under 20,000, but we still do a whole lot of spay neuter and pretty much survive on grant funding. So but again, the small groups can succeed. And the funding that you get for this program, what you raise and what Stacy matches, is really for spay neuter of community cats only. We're not looking to support your adoption program or other medical kinds of issues that the cats may have. Some of that just needs to be above and beyond some of your other fundraising and your other stuff. And you do need a new fundraising idea to participate. It has to be something you haven't tried before, just not a tweak on an old idea. And again, sometimes raising $1,000 in a small area can be challenging. So if you have to do more than one idea, that's also okay. And then some of the basic info we're looking for, and this is, we're kind of highlighting some of the issues that have happened in the past. That we do ask for contact info, who wrote the grant and who's in charge of administering this. And we recommend you consider some kind of a generic email address that other people in your organization can access. All too often, you have a volunteer who's gung-ho for the short term and applies for the grant, and then we can't get a hold of anybody at the organization because that email no longer is valid or the person has left the group. So try to make sure there's something that we can reach out and talk to the group. And yeah, use a mailing address that you want to check to come to, not a personal email address, because when we do send out the checks after successful completion, it does go to the mailing address in your application. And we do look for some online presence. You can have a Facebook presence, or maybe you have a website. Websites are not required, but whatever your online presence is, we really want to see TNR mentioned. There should be some kind of TNR program or something about community cats, because if it's strictly adoption, we don't really, it doesn't sound to us like you actually have a TNR program or something to help community cats. If you are strictly adoption, that's fine, but you're probably not a good candidate for this program. And again, we expect your online presence to show that. Uh, GuideStar is it's a national database, and funders look there for information about your organization. And once you get your 501c3 approved, the IRS notifies this GuideStar place, or somehow they get linked up, and they create a profile for you. But you are the ones that need to enter data, like your mission statement. And I would not worry about getting to become a platinum member on GuideStar. But we would like to see some basic information, like some of your financials, what your mission is, and where you operate. But it is up to your organization to fill out that profile. And this sounds really basic, but we really do want to see the specific link to your organization, not to some other organization. And even if it's on your website, because again, some groups on their website, they have a link to their GuideStar profile. That's great, but we are looking for you in that answer to put in the guidestar.org/profile, and then usually it's your EIN number. And yeah, that should be your EIN. So make sure that there's some data in there, at least a mission statement, what it is you're trying to do. And mission statements are really critical to overall grant writing. They should be short and sweet, and they should say what you do. It's not a history lesson, and it should just be pretty short and sweet. One good idea I heard once is, if you can't tweet out your mission statement, it's too long. And then we also ask you to tell us a little bit about your organization. Yeah, that should be succinct and concise. 3 pages of stuff is really a lot to read through. And again, to tell us what it is you do and how, and why you do it, because we want to know that you know the state of community cats in your area. You know what the problem is. You pretty much have an idea of how to solve it. We all know spay neuter works. And yeah, because we get that there's a whole bunch of problems with community cats and public attitudes and all of that stuff, but we're looking for your local area to tell us you know the problem in your area. And trust me, you are not the only caring and compassionate people doing this work. Sometimes the people think that they are, but because then again, that there's some places that there's some organizations that like to blame or shame other groups and say that because so and so aren't doing their job, that we're having to do this. And it's a grant application in general is not a place to blame or shame any other groups. It really makes it look like you don't know how to play well with others, and that's not a good tone to set with a funder. And yes, we really do need you to have some kind of a TNR program or some kind of way to address the community cat issues to be eligible. A lot of applications, people are wanting to start a TNR program, but again, it can be really hard and to get started, and making sure that you have the committed volunteers. So this program is not really for startup money. But you can be a fairly new program, but if you have not done any community cats or TNR before, you're probably not going to get funded. And we will look for how the public can get in touch with you. A lot of the people who need our help, well, again, because I mean, there's feral cats on public property, and then you deal with caretakers and things, but there's also a lot of community cats on private property. So a lot of the people who do need your help, even some of the caretakers of the cats on public property, they may not have internet access. So if the only way to contact you is through an online application, you may not be reaching your target. Again, depending on kind of where you are in the country, but that's what we look for on your website and in your data. and in your story. And then what we ask for your average cost for what you have to pay for spay neuter of community cats. That really should be one number. I know that it can vary. Perhaps you have multiple providers. There's usually a price differential for males and females, maybe even a differential for in heat and pregnant. But still, if you calculate by 1 year, 2018, you know how much money you spent and how many cats you fixed, that you can come up with one number, and just a 2018 average or something is just fine. We just are looking for a general idea. And then we also ask about live release rates. And that really only applies if you have an adoption program. It is the number of live outcomes, and that's adopted out, returned to owner, transferred to rescue, the number of live outcomes divided by the total intake number. It is only for adoption programs. It should just be an NA if you don't have an adoption program. And then, so then when we ask if you spay and neuter before adoption, that should also be NA, because again, you don't have an adoption program. And if you don't understand that term, you might want to Google it. There's a lot of the national organizations are really tracking live release rates at shelters, because again, a lot of the national organizations have no idea what we struggle with in the rural areas where there are no shelters, but that's a separate webinar. But again, live release rate only applies if you have an adoption program. And let's see, combo testing refers, let's see, to the FIV, FELV testing. It's not a question of just making sure they don't have a URI. And it is really not recommended. None of the national organizations who specialize in community cats and TNR and ferals, none of them recommend combo testing for feral cats. The bottom line is, with limited funding, which we all have, limited funding is simply best used to stop reproduction. And there's a lot of issues too about the efficacy of the testing, but we happen to agree with all the experts who simply say no. And then we do want to hear about your previous fundraising efforts, and realizing that it can be very, very challenging for a lot of us. And we will share success stories from other people. And to reiterate, yes, you do have to have a new idea or ideas. You can have more than one. And yeah, it can be really challenging for a lot of us in finding volunteers, but we do have lessons learned from other groups, and most of the groups succeed quite well in participating in this program, and they are able to raise the money, and even better, they find more donors, they find more volunteers, sometimes they find more clients, but that can also be expected. Then after approval, we work with you to finalize your fundraising idea or ideas. And then there's about a 3-month window for fundraising. And you do need to report back to us. And there are 2 different deadlines. We want to know how much you raised. And that's just a dollar amount. Please, I don't need bank statements or receipts or anything like that. Just a dollar amount of what you raised. And then you can, and well, while you're raising your money, you can start spending it on community cats. But we usually approve a whole batch of organizations for one window to fundraise. And so we're waiting for everybody to send in their reports before the checks go out. So yeah, other people are also counting on you. And again, meeting deadlines is important in overall grant writing. So please make sure you meet those deadlines. And then after that, there's another deadline for telling us how many animals you were able to fix with the funds. And we do like stories and pictures and things. And again, we don't need vet invoices or anything like that, because again, you get approved because your application was good enough that we trust you to be good stewards of this money and to tell us the truth. So no, we don't need any kind of other information like that, invoices and things, because there's plenty of other paperwork to look at. And then after you've successfully completed it, you are eligible to reapply then for the next round, which may take really about 4 months maybe to hear back, because it's again it's we kind of wait to have enough good applications to kick off a whole nother round. And I don't know if I blew past the slide, but there should have been a slide too that said if you do not alter before adoption, if you have an adoption program and do not alter everything before adoption, including kittens, then you are not eligible for funding. That is just a big no-no. Everybody knows the voucher programs don't work and the public doesn't follow through. And if you don't have a pediatric vet, try to find one. And then don't forget about Asheville, the ASPCA Spay Neuter Alliance. It used to be Humane Alliance, headquartered in Asheville. They have some good videos and stuff for vets to look at. And vets can go there for training about pediatric surgery. But since we're seeing cats in heat at 3 months, you absolutely must alter before adoption, or again, you won't be eligible for funding. But anyway, so that's kind of a real quick and dirty, a whole bunch of information. Do we have questions?
Yeah, Julie, thank you so much for going through this. And I do have some questions. Just for everybody's benefit, just putting on your hat, pretend like there was somebody who knew absolutely nothing about the Community Cats grants. How does the process work?
Well, you submit your application, and then, like I said, within 4 months, you should hear back, and we might come back with some questions about your application, and so there'll be some email back and forth as we just try to understand what you said, and then there's finally a batch will be approved. Maybe 10 to 15 organizations will get approved, and then we start we kick off and we spend some time, about a month usually, trying to help you finalize your fundraising idea, something that might work. And then we're able to share the lessons learned from previous groups that might have tried something similar. And then your 3-month window starts. And we do have monthly conference calls in that fundraising window where you get to ask questions and report on your progress and ask questions of other people too. And again, we liberally share information from other groups that have succeeded and all of their good lessons learned.
Right. So you go to the communitycatspodcast.com website, you scroll down to the bottom of the home page and it says apply for a grant. So that's where you will actually find the page that describes everything that Julie basically just shared with everyone. And then the application is right there. So it's on the website, the homepage of the Community Cats podcast. You just have to scroll down and then there's like a button at the bottom that you hit on the bottom of the homepage. So that's where you can find out the information. And I would say, from a timeline perspective, groups should think of this as it's almost a year-long process, because there's the period of waiting while we're gathering applications to create another group. We've done 8 different Community Cat Grant groups so far. I believe a 9th one is starting or is in progress at this point in time.
It's in progress. Mm-hmm.
And so, so we've had over 100 different organizations, or I'll say 100 different successful projects, because we've had some organizations join in multiple times. Because just to clarify, if you have an organization that is successful one time through and then they have another fundraiser, a different new fundraiser that they want to try, they can reapply.
Right, and sometimes they learn about an idea that's worked for somebody else, so they want to try that, or maybe sometimes it's a holiday thing, and so their new idea is going to coincide with the holidays, and they'll try something they hadn't done before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you do have the conference calls, so the groups get to kind of network amongst themselves and find out bits and pieces about things that you had mentioned at one point, that there was even some conversation about like trapping tips and that kind of thing. So there are other topics that sometimes come up, in those monthly calls that can be supportive amongst the groups.
Well, that's because if anybody's doing spay neuter for community cats, you often feel very alone and afraid and without any support. It's probably very little local or community support. So it can be really beneficial to your mental health just to talk to somebody else doing the same thing, maybe even in another state, but just having a sympathetic ear and people who understand your problem can be, well, from my perspective, it's really good for my mental health.
Yeah, yep. So lots of questions about examples. What are new fundraising, like what's a new fundraising idea, or what are some of the ideas that some of the groups have done?
Well, as far as a new idea, it has to be something you haven't done before. You don't get to just change your logo or sell a different design of a t-shirt if you've done t-shirt sales before. But if you haven't done t-shirt sales before, go ahead and try it. And maybe you haven't ever done a direct mailing. Maybe you're not really collecting addresses of people, so you can maybe start collecting addresses of your supporters. So maybe you want to do an appeal letter, some kind of a direct mail. And then we have a whole bunch of tips for how the best way to succeed in some kind of a direct mailing like that. And then there's different kinds of events. Groups have had a lot of luck with like wine tastings or a pub crawl if they find some animal friendly businesses in their area, even a restaurant that will host an evening where they can do a fundraiser and maybe even with karaoke or bingo or something like that. But anything with raffle or bingo or anything, it's a game of chance. Check with your state laws about legalities and getting permissions. But again, it's just a local business who might host an evening. Paint parties are really popular coming up, and just some kind of artsy stuff. So one gal, they did a poetry reading and some other readings just at this local cafe that was very successful. But one of the most popular that seems to work nationwide is kitten yoga. And I think you did have that handout. Is that
Yeah,
right?
unfortunately, I forgot to upload it, but I'll email Kitten Yoga out to everybody. So, and
Yeah.
it was a blog post too. So if folks go to the communitycatspodcast.com website and just in the search bar put in Kitten Yoga, that'll come up on the homepage there. So yeah, my apologies. I meant to upload it and I forgot. So I will make sure I get that out to everybody. But yeah.
Yeah, because that's something that can seem to work just about anywhere. And even if you don't have an adoption program, I'm sure you know somebody in your area that does, and you can get some kittens to come to yoga. But a friendly yoga instructor is required and also a good venue. The only non-successful kitten yoga event was when they were sharing a venue. It was a long building divided into two sides, and they were doing salsa dancing lessons on one half and kitten yoga in the other half, and there was no namaste.
Donna Edwards reports in that she did drag queen bingo and it was very successful.
Well, yeah, in fact, because now she's in Western Pennsylvania, if I recall correctly, and she wasn't sure how that was going to go over. But they teamed up with a local firehouse that does this kind of. They host the event, and then there's a drag queen group that loves to do fundraisers for animals, and they use the firehouse as the venue. And so this can work too with like motorcycle clubs that maybe do rides and want to raise money for charity, bike riders, bicycles, and other JCs and Chamber of Commerce and other groups that they just like to pick an organization to do a fundraiser for, so you can kind of piggyback on that. But in this case, it was the firehouse was the venue. The drag queens do this, and then the firehouse is looking for an organization that they would split the proceeds with, but that would do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as cooking spaghetti and serving spaghetti and wine. And yeah, it was grossly successful. I mean, wildly successful, I should say. They had to run out and get more food, if I recall Donna saying. Um, but yeah, they made, I believe it was $6,700 was their half of the take.
My goodness. Wow.
Um,
Congratulations.
yeah, it was drag queen bingo, and the drag queens know how to do this. The firehouse knew it, and then they just got plugged in as the charity of choice for that particular event.
That's great. That's great. A couple questions. So basically the objective of the group over the 3-month period is to raise $1,000 or up, obviously higher the better. And then the foundation that I'm partnered with will match up to $1,000. So they'll get a second $1,000 for the first $1,000 that they raise. So there'll be a match there. Um, with regards to the fundraised dollars, as well as everybody understands, the foundation dollars are meant to be spent on spaying and neutering. The fundraised dollars, is that also for spay neuter, or is there any latitude for other medical expenses there?
By exception, I mean, we'll listen to your story, but for the most part, yeah, the need is still so great just for spay neuter money. Um, and again, depends on what they raised and things, but yeah, by exception, we'll talk about some of that stuff. And if the groups are not successful in raising 1,000, because we have had a couple of those, Stacy will match a lesser amount if you couldn't succeed. But if it gets close, we'll talk. If you're struggling to raise 1,000, we'll come up with some more ideas. Because there's no substitute for using the matching language as you advertise and things. That every dollar raised will be matched, and we'll give you that language. And using the Community Cats podcast logo, um, the matching language really does help open up wallets quite a bit. And also, if you do have some kind of event or you're out in the local public, and even if you're not participating in this program, another idea that has worked really well nationwide is if you have an old trap or a broken trap that maybe you can clean up and paint, and that becomes your donation jar wherever you go, because people come over and ask what's that about, and that's how you find supporters, or well, maybe clients, and caretakers or people who want to get involved. That has been a really good draw, just to have a trap as a donation jar. You could use a brand new one, but a lot of groups prefer just to repurpose an old one or a broken one. Again, make it clean, and but that's a good conversation starter. It really draws people over to you if they're curious.
So we have an email in back about with regards to the spay neuter before adoption, and there is one organization that's in an area where they are limited because the veterinarian gets very backed up in appointments, and so if the kittens are old enough and they can get appointments in a timely manner, they'll get them altered. But in some cases, they have to do a prepaid adoption where then the owners bring the kittens in to that clinic to get them spayed or neutered. But it is, I believe, prepaid before they leave with the kitten. Does that disqualify them?
I would say yes. I have not seen prepay programs that work, and I don't know where this person is located, but we also have some circumstances where organizations are held hostage by a private vet who won't work with them if they use any other vet, which is not cool business in my opinion. But hopefully you're not being held hostage by a private vet. Maybe you just have limitations, or I don't know how far you would have to go to find a pediatric vet and maybe take a litter of kittens just because they can't get in to another vet. Like I said, I have been doing spay neuter for 15 years and used to do adoptions here in Tennessee, and I used to trust the public. I no longer do.
So they do follow up with 100% compliance at this point in time. But so I would say that's probably a question that should be brought, by email directly to you for a
Yes, yeah, send
conversation.
me an email because, like I said,
Yep.
it just because there may be other options, and just a little bit of creative thinking can help you, because it just takes one cat to not get followed through because maybe something happens, the owner's in the hospital, the appointment gets missed, it gets given to somebody else, and boom, she's had a litter of kittens because she's only 5 months old.
Right.
Um, and then so there goes the $1,000 work that you just did. Uh,
Right.
um, but yeah, send me an email about the specific circumstances, and maybe we can brainstorm a way, or maybe the vet can set aside some appointments. Can we just have 3 slots every week for pediatric kittens?
Is it acceptable to do more than one fundraiser during the 3-month period, or do you prefer just one event only?
It is perfectly acceptable to do more than one, or more than one kind of thing. Maybe you have an event, but then the whole time you're also doing a direct mail, or a Facebook fundraiser. It's because I know, speaking for myself in my county program here in Tennessee, there's no way I could do one event and raise $1,000. No way. So it's perfectly fine to do more than one.
I'm going to allow you to try and interpret this. And Susan, if you're out there and if you want to expand on this question, because it's a little bit, it's a little vague, but I'll put it out there. So she's in a county the size of Connecticut with a population of 7,000, and she's looking for potential successful fundraising ideas with that sort of knowledge. So I guess she's looking for a rural fundraiser idea is what I'm thinking here. But
Yeah,
Susan, tell
because
me if I'm wrong.
well, my county is 300 square miles and 11,000 people. And we've had people with some, like, especially out west, I don't know where you are, but we had a Wyoming gal succeed, serving a big wide area with the low population. But yes, we do have ideas that work in rural areas. In fact, now this is not a good idea for this grant program just because it is like a 3-month window typically. But if any of you, you should have a nice brochure. Go visit your local funeral homes and leave them some information, because every year somebody picks us, in lieu of flowers, please donate to our county organization. That is our best fundraiser. But again, you can't count on somebody dying in a certain window. But I would check with the funeral homes and just have some of your information there. They know how to deal with you if you just go in and ask to talk to somebody about a possible charity, because they love to have options. The funeral homes love to have options to present to these grieving families on the worst day of their lives. They love to have your information. So I would do that in a rural area, because people die whether they're rural or not. So, and then again, other ideas that have worked in rural areas.
So this is a bit more of a generic question, but you are a great resource, Julie. So it's sort of, while we have your time here, we're gonna draw upon your advice. Sarah asked the question: tips for new TNR groups, fundraising ideas, gaining volunteers, supporters. Any important noteworthy tips? I know you've shared some, but are there any others that you'd like to share with Sarah and the others today?
Boy, howdy. If you're a new group, that's great. But I would have some serious discussions with your board, because board implosions happen. There's a life cycle of organizations. It's forming, you get formed, and then there's usually a storm, and then you start normalizing things, and then you can start performing. But one of the biggest issues with new groups, and from what I have seen, make sure that everybody on the board is comfortable with spaying pregnant females. Make sure that everybody on the board is comfortable with pediatric surgery. Make sure that everybody on the board, their own cats and dogs are fixed. And you probably want to make sure that, and some funders will ask, is everybody on the board donating to your organization in one way or another? I mean, not if, and some organizations, they require every board member to either donate or raise, $500 or $1,000 or some amount. I mean, that's up to you all to discuss and decide. But there can typically be a lot of issues. And then you get into the whole thing of, are you going to do adoptions or not? And some groups implode over that issue. They thought they were going to be strictly TNR, but then somebody starts wanting to foster, and so they see money being siphoned off for fostering, or even worse, they get afraid that they're going to be expected to foster and they don't want to foster. It has to be perfectly fine for your board members to not foster. And then what some organizations do, if there is a member of the group that wants to foster, that's fine, but it's out of their own pocket. No organizational funds will go into that foster program. But again, those are just some of the discussions that I think you should have that might preclude, a big argument. And again, and how much, and are you able to reimburse for mileage or gas? Or because this does take a lot of time. And there are no grants that I know of that will pay you things like gas money for people. Maybe you can get some gas cards donated from businesses. That's few and far between. But I would just have some of that stuff, and I would make sure expectations are known. Yes, you might have to drive X amount of miles a week, to clean up a colony, or how much work are people expected to do, and are they going to be able to reimburse for any of their costs? And because I know money gets really tight, because yeah, one taking gas, you can fix a female cat in general.
All right. Sandy asked, question, she received one of these grants 2 to 3 years ago. Does she need to reapply?
Yes, you are eligible to reapply after successful completion, but yes, you must reapply. Just submit another application.
And Karen writes in, and she's suggesting that you say this, but I'm going to say this and agree with Karen substantially that the calls that are had are wonderful, and Julie is incredibly supportive, working with the groups, and the group always is incredible as they go through the process together. And Karen, who has been in the program, I want to say at least twice, maybe even 3 times, but I'm pretty sure she's gone through it twice. Really appreciates the
Shinovar,
program. Shinovar,
Yeah, because there was another one, Bikini something is another
Bikini
Karen.
Beach. Yeah.
Yeah, Karen's been through it, I think twice. But yeah, it is, well, this work is really hard, and working in rural Tennessee is really hard. So one of the few joys, what brings joy to this crabby old maid's heart, is talking to these groups and hearing them succeed, and very proud. They never thought they could do it. They'd never thought they should try, and they stretch themselves a little bit and have some success. And yeah, that's the joy in my life.
Yeah, I know when, I went through, participated in a couple of the early groups, and it is amazing how, we're out there trapping at, God knows what hour of the morning, trying to get those cats and bottle feeding kittens or whatever. And but how scared everybody is about fundraising and trying something new. Do you have any tips on how to sort of overcome that fear of fundraising?
Well, put your big girl panties on. um, but I think some of it is you are not asking for yourself. We all feel very awkward, I'm using air quotes, begging for money. But I think if you conduct yourself in a professional manner, and you have a professional story to tell, you have a good mission, you're just not a bunch of crazy cat ladies who think nobody else cares about cats, and you have to come out and save the world and put everybody else down while you're doing it. I mean, don't be that person, but just behave in a professional manner. Again, you have a good mission statement. You are helping the community, whether people want to believe it or not. You are a good community resource, and you are deserving of funds to solve a problem that it improves the cats' lives, and improves the lives of the whole of people in the community as well. And yeah, so just yeah, behave that way. And again, some people aren't going to give you money, but you are not asking for yourself. You are asking for your mission, because your mission is what's important in your community.
Now, if somebody wants to, or if they explore the option of, I believe we've had a couple of groups do this, which is they've actually expanded the matching opportunity beyond the $1,000 by finding other sources to kind of be like a secondary match. I assume that's fine.
Yeah, and that's really some of the larger groups. That's what we've done. If you're larger than what we normally fund, yeah, then they are able to do that. Um, they have a separate match, so they are going to raise 2,000 to get a 2,000 match. And that's what some groups have done. They found the power of this matching language, and so they have had some donors. Again, but you don't get money if you don't ask. So sometimes you have to make sure your donors know about these opportunities. Would you like to give us, typically you give us $500 a year. I'm making numbers up, but this donor is good for $500 a year. Would you like us to be able to apply this to another kind of a matching effort, so your 500 becomes 1,000? Of course, they almost all say yes, and some of them say, in fact, let me give you 1,000 if you can double it. So
Right.
keeping the matching language going, even though you have to, sometimes it's an anonymous donor. But again, Christmas is coming up, and some people, if you have some reliable end of year givers, maybe you can ask them, would it be okay if we use your donation as a secret Santa, and try to raise some matching funds. Because again, the match really does seem to work.
Yeah, I back in, it was 2012 or 2013 at the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. The fiscal year ends May 31st, and we had never really done a fiscal year end campaign, fundraising campaign, sort of like you do at PBS or, you know, on public radio or whatever. And so what we did was we reached out to the board, and the highest donors, I think it was donors who gave $250 and up. And we said we wanted to do a matching campaign. So we raised X amount of dollars of the big donors. And then we went out to the big wide world and said, we want you to match, you know, those funds. And I mean, it didn't work out to like perfect match to match dollars, but it was close enough. And I mean, I wasn't going to complain, because I think the first year it brought in like $20,000 or $25,000. So it was a surprisingly successful event when you think of, oh, well, you know, it's May, the middle of May, who wants to fund, you know, who's going to give money then? Because usually all the statistics you read is that you get 3/4 of your fundraising happens, you know, in the middle of October, November, December, and a little bit of January. That's like your fundraising season, is when most of the giving happens statistically. But it really was a nice additional fundraiser to help close the gap on the fiscal year for the organization, and people seem to understand it and be motivated by trying to match, you know, what the board and leadership donors were putting up. So I think that's definitely a worthy consideration. Peer pressure is very successful in many ways. So that works out really, really well. Let me just scan quickly here, see if, all right. So it says here, we are a group that also works with dogs. Should we have a submission statement for TNR?
Well, it depends on what your mission statement says. If you're just dealing with pets or community cats, yeah, send me your mission statement, but it needs to be clear that you also address the cat problem in your area.
All right.
And like for me, we deal with, our mission statement is about pets, and a lot of our TNR, it's feral cats on private property. I kind of consider them pets in my own language, because they are outside cats that have a caretaker, that they have to be trapped to get to the clinic. But yeah, that's our TNR program.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
At loan traps to the public.
Yep. Sounds great. So for folks that have more questions and would like to reach out to you directly, on the screen is Julie's email, grants@communitycatspodcast.com. My email is stacy@communitycatspodcast.com. So if you need to reach out to me, you can do that, Stacy without an E. So feel free to do that.